Alright, we're on lesson 16. Our objective says, I will be able to use the order of operations and substitution to simplify and evaluate variable expressions. This is basically the same thing that we did in lesson 9, only the expressions get a little more complicated. They give us a few more steps, but all we have to do is follow our order of operations and we should be fine. So we're simplifying and evaluating variable expressions. So here I've got this expression, negative a, open parentheses, negative a, p minus a, for a equals 3 and p equals 4. It says to evaluate each expression for the given values of the variable. So all I've got to do is everywhere I see an a, I see that a is equal to 3, so I just plug in or substitute those values. Everywhere I see an a, I replace it with a 3. So that's negative 3. P I replace with a 4. 4 minus a is 3. Close my parentheses. So I've plugged those values in. Now all I need to do is evaluate those values. To do that, we simply use our order of operations. So I start with my innermost parentheses. 4 minus 3 gives me 1. I bring everything else down. Remember, I'm doing G, E, M, A. Grouping symbols, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. Start with that grouping symbol. 4 minus 3 is 1. Now I'm still working inside my grouping symbols here. I'm going to leave this negative 3 on the outside until the very end. I've got a negative 3 times a positive 1. A negative times a positive gives me a negative 3. Alright, and then I've got here negative times a negative, which gives me a positive 9. All I did was follow my order of operations. Same thing here. I want to go ahead and plug in these values, only this time I've got the a equals negative 2 and x equals 7. Okay, so everywhere I see an x, I'm going to replace it with 7. Everywhere I see an a, I'm going to replace it with negative 2. So here I've got a negative out in front of this x, so that's negative 7 plus. I've got a negative 2. For that negative, go ahead and always keep it in parentheses so that you can keep up with what is, or so that you can keep up with that negative sign right there. So I'm going to leave that negative 2 in parentheses. I bring down this minus here. I bring down this x. X is 7. I'm replacing it. I'm plugging in. I'm substituting. Now watch this. I've got a minus from here. I've got a minus in the problem, so I write a minus. And then I've got a negative 2. So I need to, again, put it inside parentheses so that I include both the minus and the negative 2. Now, I've got a lot of stuff going on here. I'm going to first, let's do our grouping symbols, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. I got a lot going on in my grouping symbols. Let's start with this first grouping symbol that I see here. I've got negative 7 plus negative 2. I go same signs, add, and keep. Those signs are the same, so I add. That gives me 9, and keep. I keep that as negative. Same signs, add, and keep. I'm going to bring down this minus sign right here. Now here I've got 7 minus negative 2. Anytime we see a minus a negative, remember, we always change that to plus a positive. Minus and negative is always the same thing as plus a positive. Change subtraction to addition, change the sign in the second term. Then I've got 7 plus 2, which is just 9. Now all I've got left is a negative 9 minus 9. Again, I've got this subtraction right here that I want to change to addition. Remember, that's lesson 6. Always change subtraction to addition. Change the sign of the second term. Change subtraction to addition, change the sign of the second term. That was a positive. I made it a negative. So that's ugly. Let me get that a little less ugly. Negative 9 plus negative 9. Again, I go same signs, add, and keep. These signs are the same, so I add. 9 plus 9 is 18. Add and keep. Keep this as negative. So all I did was plugged in those values and then followed my order of operations. This B right here, you can skip that because that's the same as this. Okay? So skip that. Make sure you get those steps. Let's look at this. I've got X. I'm doing the same thing. X, open parentheses, X plus 2y, close parentheses, minus X. Everywhere I see an X, I'm going to replace it with 1/2. Everywhere I see a Y, I'm going to replace it with 1/4. So I've got X, which is 1/2, open parentheses. I see another X, replace it with 1/2, plus 2 times Y, which is 1/4, minus X, which is, again, 1/2. Did I close my parentheses here? Yeah, close my parentheses. Now, I'm just following my order of operations. Grouping symbols, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. I start in the innermost grouping symbol. That's this 2 times this 1/4. Everything else I bring down. So 1/2, 1/2 plus 2 times 1/2. When you're multiplying a whole number times a fraction, you put the whole number over 1, multiply the numerator times the numerator. 2 times 1 is 2. Denominator times denominator. 1 times 4 is 4. Okay? Close my parentheses. Bring down that minus 1/2. Now, I've still got inside grouping symbols, an operation that I need to complete here. I've got 1/2 plus 2/4. So here I've got this 1/2 on that one, the outside. I could distribute this, but I'm going to work inside my grouping symbols first. I need to find a common denominator between 2 and 4. Well, that's going to be 4. 1/2 is equal to 2/4. So I've got 2/4 plus 2/4. I bring down everything else. I've got 1/2 times 2/4 plus 2/4. What's 2/4 plus 2/4? I've got a common denominator, so I just add my numerators. 2 plus 2 is 4. 1/2 times 4/4, which is just 1. So that's, I'm going to bring this, I'm going to draw an arrow if it helps you. 1/2 times 1 minus 1/2. Okay? Now, I have two operations here. I've done everything inside grouping symbols. I don't have any exponents, so I'm doing multiplication, division, then addition and subtraction. So I first multiply this 1/2 times this 1, which gives me 1/2 minus 1/2. Anything minus itself should give me 0. So here I should have a 0. All that work, and then I got me a 0. So I plugged in or substituted those values, and then I just followed my order of operations. Plugged in or substitution, plugged in or substituted, and then followed my order of operations. Grouping symbols, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. Let's flip to the back. Alright, we've got two different of these. Let's see, we may just do one. Let's see. Let's start with this one. Evaluate each expression. We're doing the same thing. We've got ym cubed. Ym cubed. It tells me m is -2 and y is 2.5. So again, after I've plugged in, I know I'm following this. If you need to write the expression down, then do. Okay, y, it tells me is 2.5, so I've got 2.5 I'm plugging in for y. M, it tells me is -2, so I plug in -2 cubed. I have two operations here, multiplication and exponents. I've got to figure out which one of those I do first. I don't have any grouping symbols, so I move to exponents. So I'm going to cube that -2. That's -2 times -2. If you want to write this out, you can. -2 times -2 times -2. -2 times -2 gives me a +4. That's a 4 times a -2. 4 times -2 gives me a -8. So 2 cubed is -8. So I've got a 2.5 times -8. Alright, then all I've got to do is multiply that out. 2.5 times 8. What's that? 16, 20. I've got one decimal place in my factor, so I move my decimal over. So this is a positive times a negative, which should give me a -20. Alright, if this step confused you right here, all I'm doing is cubing that -2. You could also do that in your head. -2 times -2 times -2. That's a +4 times a -2, which gave me this -8 right here. So I did my exponent first because I'm following my order of operations, then I multiplied by that -2. Alright, last one we're going to do. This one, several steps, but we can get through it pretty quickly. I've got this whole expression right here. It says, well, if a equals 3 and b equals -1, what is the value of this? This is the expression it wants me to evaluate. Okay, so 2a over 5 minus b. Again, you don't have to write this step, but you can if it helps you. Alright, so I'm just plugging into that expression. I just rewrote the expression right here. So 2 open parentheses, it tells me a is 3, so let's plug that in. 3, and then 5 minus, I've got a minus sign right there in my expression, and then that b from right here is a -1. So I've got to have 2 minuses. This is the subtraction, and then that is a negative, and then this whole thing is squared. Now from here, what a lot of people want to do is they want to start squaring this numerator and squaring that denominator. You cannot do that until you simplified inside your grouping symbols. So I've got to simplify inside grouping symbols before I do anything. Let's leave that 2 on the outside. Let's leave this 3 as it is, and then I've got 5 minus a negative. There's that minus a negative again, which we know we are going to turn to plus a positive. So that's 3 over. Let's go ahead and evaluate in the denominator. Remember, there's an understood parentheses around that whole thing. I've got to get a value here inside my grouping symbols before I can square it. Got to simplify inside grouping symbols first. So 5 plus 1, that's 6 squared. Okay?
That 3/6 I could simplify to 1/2. So 2 times 3/6 we know is 1/2 squared. Again, I've done all my grouping symbols now. I'm going to move to my exponents. That's 1/2 squared. So 1/2 times 1/2, which gives me 1/4. Multiply that out if you need to. So I'm going to go ahead and square this 1/2. 2 times 1/2 times 1/2, we just said is 1/4. Then I've just got 2 times 1/4. Again, I've got a whole number being multiplied by a fraction. So I put the whole number over 1. 2 times 1 gives me 2. 1 times 4 gives me 4. That's 2/4, which simplifies to 1/2. So I've got to simplify inside. Again, all I'm doing is plugging in or substituting these values and then following my order of operations. I'm plugging in or substituting these values and then following the order of operations. That is all for that lesson.